There's no country on earth that would tolerate missiles raining down on its citizens from outside its borders. So we are fully supportive of Israel's right to defend itself from missiles landing on people's homes and workplaces and potentially killing civilians.
What we want to do is live in peace. We want to live in peace with ourselves, with all of our neighbors someday, we hope, and that's what we ask, that's what we're demanding, that's what will bring an end to the current round of fighting.
Well, Charles, let's talk about Turkey, because today the Prime Minister there referred to Israel as a terrorist state. That's raised a lot of hackles here in Washington and elsewhere. What do you make of it?
It's one of the reasons why Hamas started all this in the first place. And they did, with a barrage of about 150 rockets over several days before Israel retaliated. Why would they want to do that? Because Hamas's strategic aim right now is to institutionalize the change in their relations, their power. Two sources of the power. Number one, the weaponry, new weaponry. They can actually hit Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They shot a rocket that landed outside of Jerusalem the first time in 40 years that's happened. So their weaponry is now sophisticated and stronger. But they also want to translate their new strategic relation by the change in the neighborhood. Turkey, which was a very strong pro-Israel ally for 60 years, is now run by a moderate Islamist who's extremely anti-Israel. He calls Israel a terrorist state today. Egypt is run by the Brotherhood, which, as you know, is the mother organization of Hamas, which is simply the Palestinian wing of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. And lastly, the Emir of Qatar, he dropped in on Gaza a month ago, and he left behind $500 million. So there's an array of countries. So what's Hamas trying to do? It wants to translate that increase in strength into new agreements. Its demands now for the ceasefire are that Israel agree not to attack again, to allow Hamas to build up its weaponry, and pledge not to hit any Hamas leaders and not to hit in the future any Hamas weapons or missiles, which means it would have a truce. It never will have a peace. It will have a truce. It's called a hudna, during which they will become extremely strong, develop hundreds, thousands of rockets that can hit Israel, can hit Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and put 80% of Israel under its rockets. Israel will never agree to that. That's slow suicide. So as long as Hamas is demanding that, the offensive will continue. And if it keeps demanding it, as we heard David Lee Miller report, beyond a day or two, there will be a ground invasion. The ultimate objective is that Hamas becomes Hezbollah South. Hezbollah has 50,000 rockets, which are Iranian. Essentially, Israel is in a standoff. It cannot attack it because of the fire that would rain on its cities. Hamas wants to get to that level of deterrence, so Israel will not attack it. It's much weaker today, but it wants a truce that will institutionalize its immunity to any Israeli attack, so it becomes a Hezbollah. And Iran is behind it all, because Hezbollah and Hamas are clients of Iran. Iran is thinking about an Israeli strike on its nuclear program. It's saying to Israel, we're going to arm Hamas. It'll rain rockets on Tel Aviv from the south. Hezbollah already is invulnerable in the north, and will put you into a situation of disastrous attack if you attack us, even before Iran retaliates directly. This is all about Iran and Israel. Iran trying to maneuver Israel into a corner where it can't attack, and it creates clients that Israel also can't attack.
Given what Charles has said and given what we know about what Hamas's stated intentions are, quickly just want to ask, who thinks a ceasefire is just a fool's errand at this point?
I think it's highly unlikely.
Well, I think it's the goal, but I think it is unlikely too.
We know how
It'll
Charles
happen
feels.
at a point where Hamas thinks it cannot achieve its objective of immunity, and then it'll realize it has to stop now, but it will start again in a month or two or a year or two.
Susan Rice did not say that this was just a bunch of demonstrators who turned a little bit violent. There was a dispute about, were there demonstrators? Were they all armed? Were some of them armed? She said clearly there were extremist elements who came in heavily armed and attacked. And the only dispute here is, were there other protesters? What were they doing?
She was telling us things that were false. Someone gave her bad information. And we need to get to the bottom of who did that and why they did that.
Charles, there is a lot of conflicting information here, and there has to be someone who has the answer to primarily the talking points that Ambassador Susan Rice used to facilitate her appearance 4 or 5 days afterwards when she made the rounds on the Sunday shows. I thought it was interesting that Senator Saxby Chambliss was on Fox News Sunday yesterday, and he said, we've heard from every department or agency that would have touched these talking points except for the White House. They all say they didn't change them. Now, the White House has said they did make a change to one technical reference to the consulate. But where does the answer lie, Charles?
Well, I think what we've achieved over the weekend, we finally have some clarity. There's one fact that is now generally accepted. Up until now, there were all these kinds of charges and suggestions. It's actually 3 scandals. Why was there no security before, what happened in the 7 hours, and why all the lies afterwards. But now we have one fact that appears to be agreed upon by the Democrats and Republicans, and even appears now in the mainstream press as a fact, and that is that the intelligence community had given a report and assessment on the 14th that said it was a pre-planned attack. And when Susan Rice spoke on the 16th, it all of a sudden had become a riot out of control. There's some dispute over what Petraeus had said, but put that aside. That means that between the 14th and the 16th, between the intelligence assessment and the White House, something changed. Someone changed it. That seems to be agreed. So that's now clarity, because it leads to a clear question. Who changed it? Why? What exactly was the nature of the change? And the most suggestive and damaging was the change made to protect the administration line in a heated election that al-Qaeda was on its heels, which Obama was repeating at every stop in the campaign. So now we can all look at that, and that's the question. Dianne Feinstein, who's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and a Democrat said, we have to get the answer to that. So the answer is going to be somewhere. It could be the White House, would be extremely damaging. But now we have a focus on one issue we all agree upon, and that's a real achievement in the investigation.
But what is also disturbing to me is the Petraeus, you speak to the member who heard from him on the 14th, he pushed the video. He pushed the video. So whether it's for Charles's reasons, that he felt pressure, because he had his whole personal life on the line and didn't want to lose his job, he denies that vehemently. He changed his story, and his story on Friday was a new one. So this is really, it's just more and more questions. I'm glad we have a scrubber. We know that happened, but this is not a routine policy of the intelligence community to say we cannot let al-Qaeda get onto us.
Or to know that we're onto them, because clearly they did not know that before
as if al-Qaeda
a month ago.
doesn't know that.
Right, that we're onto
happen.
them.
I mean, we killed their leader rather abruptly.
This has been a Sunfish production.